1900s, powerful steam locomotives and ornate passenger cars were a way of life. A way of life that is preserved today for future generations to experience at the National Railroad Museum in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The National Railroad Museum is one of the oldest and largest museums in the United States, with notable exhibits, such as Union Pacific's massive steam locomotive, aptly named Big Boy. General Motors' futuristic-looking Aero Train. The Dwight D. Eisenhower, used by the famous U.S. general to visit troops during World War II. A new reception center showcasing the history of the railroads, and a favorite of young and old alike, a passenger train ride behind the 1923 locomotive, Old 102. All of this is the result of some Green Bay area business leaders who in 1958 drummed up support to put an old steam locomotive in a city park. Since then, more than 1.5 million visitors from all 50 states and 16 foreign countries have taken in the sights. The National Railroad Museum is a subtle history lesson that stimulates the senses of sight, hearing, and touch.
The museum's philosophy is that the railroad had such a broad effect and a broad impact on American culture that almost any historical theme that you develop, you can develop around the railroad, whether it's architecture or dining car china or social history through labor unions or improving working conditions, safety, economic history. You can talk about just about all aspects of American life through the railroad. And with that as a philosophy and an operating base, I think we can offer an experience and offer information and an education for hopefully the majority of Americans.
My dad was a boilermaker back in the steam days, and I've always had an interest in railroads, so we're in the West Coast.
On July 4th, 1961, the National Railroad Museum received the first feather in its cap, and a big one at that, the Union Pacific 4017, one of only 8 Big Boys. The Big Boy was the largest and heaviest steam locomotive ever produced, and was primarily used to pull long, heavy trains at speeds faster than 70 miles per hour.
Americans, I think, are fascinated with the largest of anything. And so the Big Boy, being the largest steam locomotive in the world, is a fascinating piece of machinery for most of our visitors. To just stand there and look at that massive piece of machinery and imagine it moving down the tracks at 80 miles an hour is just awe-inspiring, I think.
4017 was built in 1941 and logged more than 1 million miles of service before coming to a stop at the museum. Youngsters in particular seem amazed at its size. This Big Boy is 132 feet long and tips the scales at 1.1 million pounds. While the Big Boy may be eye-catching thanks to its size, the Aero Train turns heads because of its looks. The Aero Train was developed by General Motors in the 1950s. This high-speed, lightweight, and eye-catching train was designed to compete with automobiles and airplanes and bring passengers back to the railroad.
Unfortunately, they looked a lot better than they performed, apparently. The cars, which were modified Greyhound bus bodies, were very, very light. The two cars were less than half the weight of a standard railroad car, passenger car of the time period. Unfortunately, they were so light that at speeds approaching 100 miles an hour, the reports say they bounced around like a basketball and, quote, practically beat the passengers to death. So from that standpoint, it was not at all successful. The other problem had to do with the technology, which was really a little bit ahead of its time. It had air suspension, it had electrical plug-ins that between the cars that were very complicated. So for a number of reasons, it never really caught on. They make a wonderful contrast, as you noted, between the future of the railroads as they saw it in the 1950s and the past as represented by the steam locomotive number 102.
The National Railroad Museum's experimental aero train is one of only two ever made. They were used by the Rock Island Line until 1966 for commuter routes in the Chicago area.
History Channel
have also been preserved, giving visitors an almost first-hand feel for what it must have been like for Eisenhower as he rallied troops.
We talked about the big boy and the largest, and that's an attraction, the aero train, because of its looks. But there is a aura associated with historic things, whether it's a battlefield or a historic house, or in this case, these two cars. And there really is a sense of something there. And I think that attracts people, and that makes people understand more about themselves and about how America got to be where it is today.
The not-for-profit National Railroad Museum relies on donations and visitor receipts to fund restoration projects and operations.
The charter for the National Railroad Museum comes from the United States Congress, so we are authorized to use that name from Congress, but that does not provide any financial support. So we operate strictly on our own, on whatever grants and donations we can get from corporations, foundations, individuals, our gate receipts, so obviously admissions are important to us.
Thanks to the generosity of Green Bay area business groups and philanthropic organizations, the museum recently opened a new year-round reception center. The Lenfesti Reception Center is oftentimes a visitor's first and last stop. It includes a large theater for daily showings of multimedia presentations. The exhibit hall features a far-reaching look at the history of railroading. While visitors tend to differ when it comes to their favorite exhibits, all agree that a day at the National Railroad Museum is not complete without a passenger train ride in a 1920s coach pulled by Old 102, a 1923 steam locomotive. For many, it's a ride down memory lane. For others, it's a real eye-opener.
As you can see, this coach is about 80 years old, and it's still pulling us along today. Steam locomotives far right is locomotive number 44. That's one of the other controls. Well, I'd like to thank you folks for taking the train ride. You guys have been a great group, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day at the National Railroad Museum.
It's a diesel-powered steam locomotive, which takes a little bit of extra. In 1988, the museum replaced the original tender with a modified diesel locomotive. And the diesel that looks like a tender actually pushes the rest of the locomotive and pulls the train around the track. It's an inexpensive, very economical way to have the train ride look good without the phenomenal cost of live steam operations. The Chicago Northwestern coach dates from about 1915 and is a very, very, I don't want to say pretty, but very, very period car. In fact, although it was constructed in 1915, it actually gives the sense of being from around the turn of the century and even the 1890s. It was just a car that was constructed to an earlier period. And so it really gives that nice sense of what it was like to travel around the turn of the century. It was hot, dusty, you had to open the windows for ventilation, the converted oil or converted gas lanterns in the ceiling, the wood paneling, just a very nice atmosphere that way. I hope that it makes people realize that the good old days maybe weren't always the good old days, especially if there's no air conditioning on those cars in the middle of the summer. But that's what it was like. That's realism.
While the view can be breathtaking from the passenger cars, engineer Jeff Truckee must have the best seat.
Sure, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. A lot of people ask or tell me that they wish they had my job. You know, it's fun. Once you get used to it, it's real easy. There's a lot more weight there than you think. You don't feel it, but when you try to slow down, you can feel the weight, and it just takes getting used to it. This isn't your regular run-of-the-mill engine here. It's one of a kind, really. I like to see them have a good time, and that's what they came here for. And we try to, give them as much information as we can and let them have a good time and learn something at the same time.
As part of that drive to open as a museum, and again, not just a display of a locomotive in a city park, the American Short Line Railroad Association donated funds to construct the depot. That opened in 1961. Hood, I think his name was Samuel Hood, was the president of the American Short Line Railroad Association at that time, and so the depot was named after him. It's patterned after a depot in Langley, South Carolina, and was new construction in 1961. It's part of the atmosphere we're trying to create. The addition of the brick platform last year, and the whole way we arrive at the station and the conductor's speech and calling all aboard, absolutely, absolutely. It really does recreate that atmosphere, that time period, I think, for people.
For children, the museum is a place to run, ride, climb, look, and learn.
I think what fascinates children is the ability to do things, to interact with the equipment. They can go through the cars, they can ride on the train, they can climb all over the small locomotive, they can see things moving. That's a big fascination. I think it's an attraction because we offer parents the ability to interact with their children by means of teaching, pointing things out. Look at this. This is what this does. I think that's very, very important for families.
On the surface, it may seem like a collection of rusty old cars. And massive steam locomotives that have long since lost their desire to pull. But the National Railroad Museum in Green Bay, Wisconsin is really a looking glass. Helping us more clearly understand and appreciate our past. When someone leaves the museum, I hope that two things have happened. Number one, I hope they have had a good time here. They've enjoyed themselves. They've enjoyed what we have to offer. And number two, I hope they take something with them in the form of an experience, either education or emotional, that we've created some kind of a better understanding of how things used to be, why things are the way they are today based on what happened in the past, or just an association because I experienced this as a child or I saw this when I was growing up. So those are the two basic things I hope visitors take away with them when they leave the National Railroad Museum. The National Railroad Museum. A place to relive cherished memories. And make new ones.
Special thanks to the Green Bay Area Visitor and Convention Bureau. For information about the Green Bay area, call 1-800-236-3976. To learn more about the National Railroad Museum, call 414-437-7623 or write to the museum at 2285 South Broadway, Green Bay, Wisconsin, 54304.
we're not leaving Wisconsin yet. When we return, we'll tour the historic Hixon house in La Crosse. Stay with us.
All aboard!
History Channel Traveler will continue in a moment.
The 60s were a time of social unrest and powerful emotions, and the music spoke.
The Eastern world, it is exploding.
Now, Cornerstone Promotions brings back the spirit of the 60s with the greatest songs of an unforgettable era.
Time has come today. Anybody here seen my old friend John?
Spirit of the 60s brings you 34 great songs which remain as a lasting message for all generations to follow.
In a white room with black curtains. Don't you want somebody to love? To everything, turn, turn, turn. Sha-la-la-la-la-la, live for today. Baby, I'll be there to shake your hand. Baby, I'll be there to share the land. You gotta lay down, lay it all down. You and I travel to the beat of a different drum. Come on, people now, smile on your brother, everybody get
Spirit of the 60s on 2 cassettes or 2 CDs. Here's how to order. Call this toll-free number for Spirit of the 60s. Cassettes $19.98, CDs $26.98 plus $5.50 shipping. Have your credit card ready and call now.
Tonight on the History Channel. From grandiose aspirations
They were beautiful, they were rich,
to political realizations,
they were powerful, and they were doomed.
a legacy tainted by scandal, death, and unbearable sorrow. The Kennedys, The Curse of Power. Tonight at 9 on the History Channel. Enter a world where danger comes with the territory. Danger Central. Weeknights at 11, only on the History Channel. How much do you know about America's heroes?
Who was the good guy?
And what about those heroes who went wrong?
Was J. Edgar Hoover a hero or a villain?
Chevy Chase and his heroic band of celebrities deliver an all-fun, all-family challenge.
I'll name the villain. You name the hero.
Get your pencils ready. Heroes and villains on the Great American History Quiz.
We now return to History Channel Traveler.
Welcome to the Hixon house. The earliest section, built about 1860 for Gideon and Ellen Pennell Hixon, was a simple frame cottage with little decoration or elegance. By the mid-1880s, Hixon had become a wealthy lumber dealer, and the house was enlarged and redecorated. A large north wing was added. The house was wired for electricity, and indoor plumbing was installed, as well as extensive remodeling on the interior. Another section was added onto the rear of the house around 1900. The exterior was never very stylish, but uses elements from the Italianate style, principally the elaborate window and door treatments, the eave brackets, and the square porch columns. Gideon and Ellen Hixon created a house that grew and changed as their lives changed. The interior of the Hixon house is much darker than our modern homes. Fashionable homes of the late 1800s used dark woods, complex patterns on their wall coverings, and heavily upholstered furniture. Drapes and curtains were drawn during the day to prevent sunlight damage to fabrics, but also because of the dust from unpaved streets. Most historical houses are reconstructions based on what we think they looked like originally. The Hixon house is very unusual in that the furnishings you see are original to the house and were purchased by the Hixon family. Unlike other historical houses, These furnishings are still in the original places where the Hixon family used them. Early photographs of the house and its interior allow the exact recreation of the family's home environment. The La Crosse County Historical Society has added 2 engraved bird's-eye view maps of the city to help put the Hixon house in context with what was happening in La Crosse. The map of 1867 shows La Crosse as a medium-sized community with much activity along the river. A small inset shows the original form of the Hixon house. The 1887 map shows that the city had grown tremendously in 20 years. Building had spread almost to the bluff. North La Crosse had been annexed into the city, and activity on the Mississippi River had multiplied.
I was originally from New England. In 1856, I came to La Crosse for the purpose of investing in a lumber company. This was just as the city's lumbering industry was beginning to develop. This business endeavor proved very lucrative for me, and I was able to build this stately manor just 4 years later, in 1860. I appreciated fine wood. This is reflected by the woodwork I chose for the house. I hired a notable local millwork firm, the Sigelke Coal House Manufacturing Company, to do the carpentry. The woodwork in the hallway is walnut, and the wall covering is an Italian-style velvet. Calling cards could be left on the card table, which has a receptacle made especially for this purpose. It is beautifully designed with inlaid wood. The plate is Limoges porcelain, and 2 watercolors by Sidney Hart on either side of the hall tree highlight the foyer. My choice of walnut woodwork is also seen in the library. An unusual crown molding surrounds the ceiling. The dual-purpose chandelier is wired for electricity, but it also can be switched over to burn gas. This was because of the unreliable early electrical generating system.
The library is furnished in the traditional manner of a Victorian gentleman's room. Parquet flooring surrounds the oriental carpet. The bookcases were custom manufactured to fit the collection of books, which is still in them today. A portrait of Gideon Hixon dominates the room.
There is a weak photographic image underneath the pastel crayon work. This technique was used to help the artist render an extremely realistic image of me. My desk is hand-carved teak with handles of ivory. And on the desk are a variety of interesting pieces. These include a Tiffany lamp, my bronze and turquoise beaded desk set, a cast bronze figure of Mercury, cloisonne, and lacquer vases, and silk-embroidered fireplace screen all reflect our many travels.
Across from the library, on the opposite side of the hallway, is the parlor. A typical visit to the residence in the late 19th century would have found the doors to this room closed. Ellen Hixon and the family used the parlor for formal entertainment of guests and for special family occasions.
As was typical of the times, we furnished our parlor with the fine articles we had collected on our travels. While it may seem cluttered to modern eyes, the style of the 19th century was to display one's collections for everyone to admire. In the front corner, there is a French-style bow front cabinet with romantic painted designs and ormolu trim. The collection of art objects were my prized favorites. These were purchased during our 1884 trip to France, Austria, Italy, and England. The club sofa, covered in green mohair, was specially made to order for Gideon. A rare silk oriental prayer rug is draped over the back. A mahogany corner chair with its matching footstool contains no nails. It is hand-doweled construction and dates from the late 1770s, making it one of the oldest pieces in the house. The 1875 Steinway piano has an upright style of cabinet, which was unusual for the Steinway Company. Of particular interest is the birch woodwork. I had it replace the original darker walnut woodwork around the turn of the century. At this time, I wanted to lighten the interior of the parlor. Ascending to the second story, my family and their guests used the grand stairway. To the left of the stair landing, there are pictures of Gideon and me. Across the hallway are pictures of our 5 sons.
For a calendar of historic events across the country, visit our website at www.historytravel.com.
Tonight on the History Channel, the FBI takes on America's most notorious hate group, the Ku Klux Klan, on lawbreakers. Then from the loss of Joe Jr. through the assassinations of JFK and RFK to the death of John Kennedy Jr., Time Machine traces the Kennedy curse. It all begins tonight at 8 on the History Channel.
Welcome to 1863. Encounter the Civil War in person on a History Channel tour. Follow distinguished Civil War experts on multi-day trips across America. For information, call 1-800-300-1503 or visit our website at historytravel.com. Book selected Civil War cruises and receive free airfare. Call 1-800-300-1503 now for details.
Do you know what it takes to found a country?
America's revolutionary leaders. We know them as winners. All they knew was uncertainty.
These men didn't know they were going to win the revolution.
It's time to get to know the human side of America's founding fathers.
In another era, John Adams would have needed Prozac.
John Hancock was a smuggler.
If there's someone in America today who reminds me a little bit of Madison, it's Bill Gates, this nerdy, awkward guy.
America's founding fathers, all of them highly educated and committed to the principles of liberty. Some of them slave owners, yet all with one amazing gift to offer the future. A lesson learned from their own failures and mistakes.
I believe that the founding fathers would be amazed that we have managed to survive.
The Founding Fathers, coming this fall on the History Channel.
Fresh from the freezer. Get them while they're cold. From the archives of the History Channel, this is Time Lab 2000. In 1916, a government naturalist honeymooning in northern Canada meets ice fishermen whose catch freezes stiff in the intense cold. When thawed weeks later, he's told the fish taste fresh. Back home, the young man attempts to duplicate this process. He fills waxed cardboard cartons full of fish, vegetables, and fruit, then quick freezes them under pressure. He convinces supermarkets to install refrigerated cases to stock his frosty fare. The public warms to his frozen foods, and soon they are found in just about everyone's home. The name of the clever entrepreneur? Clarence Birdseye. For the History Channel, I'm Sam Waterston.
We now return to History Channel Traveler.
The front bedroom was the first Hixon master bedroom. For the most part, the furniture is very representative of the late 19th century. The dresser has candle shelves, handkerchief drawers, and wooden carved fruit handles. An exceptional piece is the hand-carved mahogany dresser and bench with fold-out mirrors from the Orient. On top is a monogrammed ebony and silver dresser set.
The middle bedroom was first used as the children's bedroom before it was turned into a guest room. The floor has a recessed carpet so that our toddlers would not trip over the edge. It also shows off the parquet floor edging. A magnificent bedstead is of the later Victorian period. Beyond this door were our servants' quarters. It was a small apartment with a staircase from the kitchen. We employ between 5 to 7 servants at any one time.
The metal cover attached to the hallway wall is one of the outlets, which was part of an early household convenience. This system was installed before the 1913 death of Ellen Hixon. It is likely rubber hoses were attached to the outlets. Imagine the wonder brought about by this new labor-saving device, an interior vacuum cleaning system. This back bedroom became the second of the Hixon's master bedrooms. It must have been quieter here because it is located in the back of the house, away from the street, with a pleasant view of the flower gardens. The ceiling light fixture is made of approximately 200 pieces of Czechoslovakian crystal. It is held together by fine wire. A walnut bedroom suite, which has black painted trim and teardrop drawer handles, is an example of the fine furniture the Hixons could afford. This room has several of the family's trunks, hat boxes, and valises. It appears as though the Hixons were packing for one of their many trips. Clothing worn by Victorians was much more cumbersome, heavy, long, and involved many garments which are no longer worn today. In addition, traveling in the 19th century was done using much slower modes of transportation. Trips took much longer than today. Therefore, larger trunks and other protective cases were needed to transport the required clothes and accessories.
My family's living quarters included 3 bathrooms. This one features an early wooden sauna, which has containers for the hot coals and the water. I could sit on that built-in seat and close the door to get the desired steamy effect and relax after a hard day's work. But when I could no longer climb the stairs, I had this downstairs guest bedroom altered. It became my master bedroom. It features parquet trim flooring and gray marble fireplace with white tile trim. I purchased the large mahogany bed and dresser from Spiegel and Company of Chicago in 1886. This bed has a horsehair mattress and box spring. And there is the call button, which rests atop the bed, which summoned the servants by ringing a bell located in the kitchen. An oil painting highlights the wall. It was created by Russell Smith, who was a noted Philadelphia painter of the Hudson River School. A large Chinese screen is made of hand-carved teak with silk-on-silk embroidery. Over the mantel is a carved and gilded triptych from Italy. The chaise lounge in front of the fireplace was used a great deal by my wife Ellen during the last 4 years of her life. During this time, complications with her diabetes made her virtually an invalid.
The sitting room was an informal parlor used by our family throughout the day. Our family used this door most often to enter and leave the house. This door leads onto a side porch. This room is furnished more informally than the parlor. Comfortable seating was provided by the Morris chair and 2 Victorian rockers.
The Chinese hand-carved teakwood table has an interesting motif. The monkeys carved on the cabriole leg depict the see no evil, speak no evil, and hear no evil idea. A large Satsuma vase, a type of fine Japanese pottery, sits on top. On the mantel is a German bronze clock and urn set. The bookcases hold a number of decorative pieces, including an alabaster copy of Venus de Milo.
I added this impressive area in 1901. It was known by our family as the Turkish nook. The installation of such oriental corners in homes was a popular decorating fad beginning in the 1890s. It demonstrated the fascination which Americans had with the Middle and the Far East. The idea was these places were mysterious and exotic, and our Turkish nook is one of the only few surviving examples of this decorating fad remaining in the country. Most of the others were removed by the 1920s. 3 leaded glass sconces and an unusual chandelier light the room, along with the stained glass windows. The interior windows cleverly hide the back staircase used by the servants. I had the built-in seat upholstered with hand-woven Killam tapestry rugs from the Middle East. The 3 larger pillows were originally camel saddlebags, and there is a small ivory and ebony inlaid table to enhance the effect. By the wall is a 3-panel olive wood harem screen. In Orthodox Muslim families, a woman was kept from public view. This screen allowed a woman a place to view guests and entertainment, while yet shielding her face from public exposure.
All of the woodwork in the dining room, including the mantel, wainscot, and ceiling beams, are cherry wood. This room has a hand-painted oil-on-canvas wall covering, which was designed by Marjorie Sill Wickware in the 1920s to enhance the woodwork. She was the daughter of a prominent early lacrosse settler. Ms. Wickware designed rooms in several lacrosse houses in the late 1890s and went on to become a noted New York decorator. The Hixons brought her back to lacrosse to design these walls. Hand-painted tiles around the fireplace are Italian and designed in a pre-Raphaelite style. The scenes are romantic, which is typical of this artistic form.
The dining table and chairs are mahogany, and there are several leaves which can be added to extend the table even further. On the table is a set of interesting French Limoges porcelain. Although clearly part of the set, each plate or salt cellar or cup is slightly different. Thus, the diner has his or her own unique piece of the whole set. I had the leaded stained glass on the far wall designed this way in order to prevent the guests from viewing deliveries or laundry drying in the backyard. And a blind porch was added beyond the windows so that servants could avail themselves of it during their free moment.
On the mahogany sideboard are a pair of wooden silverware urns. These were used to store the silverware in the vertical slots. And when the urn was closed and locked, it created a kind of a seal to keep the tarnishing to a minimum.
The kitchen is dominated by the great majestic stove. It has 10 burners, 2 ovens, and 3 warming ovens. The stove burns wood, coal, or gas. An Edison-style light bulb lights the pantry. This light bulb has an elongated shape and gave a soft glow from the filament. The pantry was used primarily to store food and canned goods. A large walk-in cooler was used to store perishable food. Items which needed to be kept the coolest, such as dairy products, were placed in the chamber on the right. The doors would all be closed.
Although I had several servants, I was very active in the kitchen. After all, one of my several duties to the household was to oversee the activities of the household help. Next to the kitchen door is the call box. Buttons such as the one viewed on the bed in the downstairs bedroom were located throughout the house, and when the buzzer sounded, the servant could see which room or door had need of attention and respond accordingly. The The box was located in the kitchen because at least one servant would have been busy in this room at any time of the day, cooking, washing, canning, ironing, mending, and so forth. The kitchen was the center of activity in any 19th century household.
The Hixon House is one of the most outstanding historic landmarks in the tri-state area. It is the only house that still has its original furnishings. The house and the gardens occupy 3 city lots. As early as 1881, the property was celebrated as being superior when a noted architect, C.F. Struck, wrote that he had seen no finer interior work. The Hixon House is an outstanding piece of La Crosse County local heritage. We hope that this abbreviated video tour has given valuable insights into the human experience of the late 1800s. However, a much fuller experience may be gained from a personal tour of this historical landmark. Tours by the La Crosse County Historical Society are an opportunity to obtain a much richer appreciation as well as an understanding of life in the late 1800s.
Coming up next, Air Combat brings you the story of the visionary designers who created the Mustang, the Spitfire, the Zero, and the Messerschmitt. Then Scorpions in a Bottle unfolds the secret history of the atomic bomb. And log on at veterans.com, a new website brought to you by the History Channel. Veterans.com, a place where veterans, their families, and others can connect, share stories, and pass on the legacies of all American veterans.
AARP is an organization for people who are
out to pasture.
all washed up